malls packed with shoppers, skyscrapers going up overnight, foreign investors calling it the next China. But in that same country, millions of people are working harder than ever and somehow affording less. This is Indonesia. And the real story behind its boom is one almost nobody is telling. Who is Indonesia? Indonesia is not a small country, not even close. It is an archipelago of over 17,000 islands stretched across a distance wider than the continental United States, from the western tip of Sumatra all the way to the eastern edge of Papua. It has 276 million people, making it the fourth most populous nation on Earth, behind only China, India, and the United States. It is the world's largest Muslim-majority country, the third largest democracy on the planet, and it sits at one of the most strategically important locations in global trade, right between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, controlling shipping lanes that carry trillions of dollars of goods every single year. For most of the 20th century, Indonesia was seen as a resource-rich but chronically underdeveloped economy. The country had enormous natural wealth: oil, gas, coal, nickel, palm oil, yet it was constantly held back by deep-rooted corruption, crumbling infrastructure, and political instability. The last time Indonesia truly captured global attention was in the late 1990s, and it wasn't for good reasons. The Asian financial crisis tore through the region. The Indonesian economy collapsed almost overnight. The currency lost most of its value. Riots erupted across Jakarta, and the crisis ultimately brought down the 32-year dictatorship of President Suharto. That was Indonesia's lowest point, a country that seemed permanently stuck. But what happened over the next 2 decades is the story most people never heard. Indonesia quietly, steadily rebuilt itself into something genuinely impressive. It developed a functioning democratic system, flawed, yes, but stable. It opened its economy to foreign investment. It started building roads, ports, and infrastructure across thousands of islands. Under President Jokowi, who led the country from 2014 to 2024, the government pushed hard on 3 things: infrastructure development, attracting foreign capital, and building a digital economy. Jakarta became one of Southeast Asia's most important tech hubs, producing billion-dollar startups in fintech, e-commerce, and logistics. And the overall economy settled into something remarkably rare for a large developing country: stable growth of around 5% almost every single year. Not a boom followed by a crash, just steady, reliable, consistent growth. Today, Indonesia is one of the fastest growing major economies on Earth, beating most of Europe, beating Latin America, beating much of Asia. Foreign investment is pouring in. The skyline is rising. The digital economy is booming. And a young population with a median age of just 29 means the country still has decades of demographic advantage ahead of it. So everything is fine, right? Not even close. The shrinking middle class here is the number that should concern everyone. That in just 5 years, Indonesia's middle class shrank from 57 million people to under 48 million. 9 million people fell out of the middle class. While the economy was officially booming. How? The jobs are there. Indonesia creates millions of new jobs every year. But the quality of those jobs is the problem. Delivery drivers, street vendors, gig economy workers with no contracts and no security. Meanwhile, traditional manufacturing, the kind that historically built middle classes, is under pressure. Factories are laying people off. Some companies are relocating to Vietnam and Bangladesh, where costs are cheaper. And for workers who remain employed, real wages have barely moved in years. People are technically earning more money, but they can afford less with it. Sales of motorcycles, a key indicator of middle-class purchasing power, are still below pre-pandemic levels. Consumer debt is rising. More households are surviving on government subsidies. The GDP numbers say boom. But millions of Indonesians aren't feeling it. The nickel story now here's the engine behind Indonesia's headline growth, and it all comes down to one metal: nickel. You've probably heard about the electric vehicle revolution. Every major car company on Earth, Tesla, Toyota, Volkswagen, Hyundai, is racing to produce EVs. And every single EV battery needs one critical ingredient: nickel. Not a little nickel, a lot of nickel. And as EV production scales up over the next decade, global demand for this metal is only going to explode further. Here's where Indonesia comes in. Indonesia sits on more than 20% of the world's entire nickel reserves. It is literally sitting on one of the most valuable resources on the planet right now. But for decades, Indonesia wasn't capturing that value. It was just digging the ore out of the ground and shipping it abroad as raw material. Other countries, China, Japan, South Korea, would then process it, refine it, turn it into something valuable and sell it back to the world at 10 times the price. Indonesia was doing all the hard, dirty, environmentally damaging mining work and getting the smallest piece of the pie. That changed in 2020. President Jokowi made a decision that shocked the entire global mining industry. Indonesia banned the export of raw nickel ore. Completely. Overnight, the message was blunt. If you want access to Indonesian nickel, you don't get to take it home and process it yourself anymore. You come here. You build your refineries here. You set up your factories here. You create jobs and add value on Indonesian soil. It was an aggressive, high-risk strategy. Plenty of economists warned it could backfire badly. The European Union was so angry, it filed a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization, arguing Indonesia was distorting global trade. Indonesia didn't blink, and the gamble paid off spectacularly. Within months, billions of dollars in foreign investment started pouring in. Within a few years, giant industrial parks had appeared almost from nothing across remote Indonesian islands. Smelters, refineries, chemical processing plants, entire industrial ecosystems built at breathtaking speed. Today, Indonesia doesn't just produce a lot of nickel. It produces more nickel than every other country on Earth combined. The government pushed even further, attracting investment in battery component manufacturing, trying to capture not just the mining stage, but the entire EV supply chain, from raw ore all the way to finished battery packs. For a moment, it genuinely looked like Indonesia had cracked the code that almost every other resource-rich developing country had failed to solve. Turn your raw materials into industrial power. Force the value-added manufacturing to happen at home. Break the cycle of just being a cheap supplier to richer nations. It was an inspiring story, but this success came with a catch-one that nobody was talking about loudly enough. The China trap. Who actually funded this industrial transformation? Chinese companies came in and took control of almost the entire nickel refining industry. Massive industrial parks built with Chinese capital, Chinese technology, largely run by Chinese expertise. First, it looked like a perfect deal. Indonesia got investment and export growth. China got a secure mineral supply for its EV industry. But most of the real value flows back to China, not to ordinary Indonesian workers. And now, with US-China tensions rising, Indonesia is caught in the middle. American and European governments are increasingly uncomfortable with Chinese dominance over a critical global supply chain. Investors are getting nervous. The Jakarta stock market is already one of Asia's worst performers this year. The rupiah is weakening. A country that built its industrial rise on Chinese money is now watching that dependency become a serious vulnerability. Into this complicated situation, new President Prabowo arrived with enormous ambitions and enormous promises. His flagship program, free daily meals for tens of millions of schoolchildren across the country. A genuinely good idea for nutrition and human development, but also one of the most expensive welfare programs in Indonesian history. And it launched at exactly the wrong moment. Because simultaneously global oil prices rose. Indonesia imports oil and subsidizes fuel prices to keep social stability. A weakening currency makes those imports even more expensive. So the government is now trying to fund massive new welfare spending, manage increasingly expensive fuel subsidies, and reassure nervous investors all at the same time. The math is getting very difficult. Here's what this story is really about. Economists call it the middle income trap, the point where developing countries stall. They've done the easy part: cheap labor, commodity exports, basic manufacturing. But transitioning to high-value, high-productivity industries, that's the hard part. And most countries fail it. Indonesia's nickel boom is real. The growth is real, but growth that concentrates wealth in a few sectors while millions of ordinary people fall further behind is not the foundation of a rich country. Countries become wealthy when their middle class grows, when wages rise, when people move into skilled, well-paying jobs, when innovation comes from within. Right now, Indonesia's growth model is not delivering that.